Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is David. I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at Tokyo College. I will be today's moderator, and I'm joined by our guest speaker, Professor Jennifer Robertson, as well as our commentator, Professor Hajime ASAMA. We have a short introduction, the presentation, some comments, and we should have time for questions, which can be submitted at any time using the Q&A function in your Zoom window. Professor Robertson is Professor Emerita at the Department of Anthropology and History of Art at the Penny W. Stamps School of Art and Design, as well as the Robotics Institute at the University of Michigan. Her work covers a broad span of academic subjects, locations, and time periods, but currently focuses on a very intersectional approach to robotics and AI. Our commentator, Professor ASAMA, is project professor here at Tokyo College after joining us from the School of Engineering, where he was also a professor. His work is generally within robotics, specifically looking at how robots can be used to address complex social problems like aging, safety and security, as well as produce new social values. So I'm looking forward to today's talk, so I don't want to go any further than that. Thank you again for everyone joining us online, and Professor Robertson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm very happy to be back at Tokyo College. It's my third webinar. And I would like to begin by thanking Dr. Shimazu Naoko for inviting me to present this webinar. I'd like to thank, of course, Dr. Mita Kaori and Flavia Baldari for managing the logistics. Professor ASAMA Hajime kindly agreed to provide commentary despite his busy schedule as an engineer in the fields of robotics and AI. And of course, I owe great thanks to Dr. David Tilt, the postdoctoral scholar here at Tokyo College, who is researching value attribution. And I am greatly indebted to the expert Japanese translation by Ono Rie-san and Akiyama Tatae-san. I also want to mention that this paper is an expansion of a chapter I was invited to write in a book called Second Death, Experiences of Death Across Technologies, edited by Alger Sanpinos and Yori Valverdu. It's coming out from Springer Verlag in the Sapir Studies in Applied Anthropology, in Applied Philosophy, Epistemology, and Rational Ethics. So let's get started. The idiom, I need to share my screen here. Okay, 1 second. The idiom 50 ways in my title should not be taken as a literal metric. 50 is simply a metaphor for a number larger than a few. In his hit song, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, Paul Simon provides 6 ways to leave. In this paper, I will review a number of ways to kill a robot, together with some of the ways that robots die. Death here is broadly defined as the permanent ending of vital processes. I'll also review how deceased robots are handled. Now, my cultural area focus is primarily Japan and the United States. Both human and robots are, in several respects, electrical entities. And so in my concluding remarks, I address the question of what happens to each after the electricity is out. I begin by reviewing the coinage of robot in early 20th century fiction, followed by my working definition of actual robots in operation today. The English word robot derives from the Czech word robota, or manual laborer. It was coined by the literateur Karel Čapek and his brother Joseph Čapek, and first appeared in the former's play RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, published in 1920. RUR was staged in Prague in 1921, and afterwards in cities all over the world, including Tokyo in 1924. Very briefly, RUR is a science fiction melodrama with comical passages about an island factory that makes thousands of realistic artificial humans for global export as tireless workers. Rossum's gendered robots are not metallic. They are made from protoplasmic batter and baked. Outwardly, they look exactly like human females and males. To keep robots from inadvertently damaging and even destroying themselves, the newest models are provided with nerves so that they can feel pain. And I quote from the book, "The robots sometimes damage themselves because nothing hurts them. They stick their hands in the machines, break their fingers, smash their heads. It's all the same to them. We must give them pain. It's a built-in safeguard against damage." Now, in addition to nerves, a batch of Rossum's robots are later provided with souls, that enable them to experience anger at their exploitation by humans. The factory director rues that the generic phenotype of Rossum's robots enables them to revolt en masse. And you see the scene of the revolt here on the stage in Tokyo, 1924. Apart from their binary gender differences, they all share the same physical characteristics. Humans, in contrast, are divided by genetic, ethnic, linguistic, and national differences that have been exploited to make it impossible for them to mobilize and collaborate in union. Robots all over the world are thus able to join forces and kill all but one human. An elderly artisan named Alquist, you see here, who the robots hope is someone who can help them reproduce and replenish their numbers. Alquist reminds them that Rossum's recipe for the protoplasmic batter has been destroyed. Frantic, the robots urge him to experiment on them in order to discover a formula for robot reproduction. Long story short, Alquist fails, and sweeping away the laboratory's test tubes and other scientific tools, he resorts to reading the biblical account of Genesis. The elderly artisan then pushes a male and female robot out the door and into a new world devoid of humans, referring to the pair as Adam and Eve, husband and wife. Post-humanity has begun. Ironically, had they not been vanquished by the rioting robots, human beings would have disappeared anyway. The roboticization of all aspects of life and work had made human labor, including procreative labor, unnecessary. Alquist explains early in the play to a female visitor to Rossum's factory, quote, "Sterility has become the latest achievement of the human race," end quote. Chapek's 1920 play marks the etymological origins of robot. The 1924 performance of RUR in Tokyo made robotto a buzzword in Japan from that time forth. Today, many working definitions of actual robots are in circulation, and I've assembled one that is comprehensive yet concise. A robot is an assemblage of different technologies, sensors, optics, software, including some level of artificial intelligence, telecommunication tools, actuators, batteries, polymers, even biological cells that make it capable of navigating, responding to, and interacting with its environment with some human supervision, remote control, or through teleoperation. Not all robots are robotic in the same way, but they all have a combination of some of these features. Although there is a lot of hype and none of it verified or verifiable, there are no autonomous robots free from any human supervision or intervention. It's something to keep in mind. Some robots are usefully perceived as embodied AI in the sense that they're equipped with software algorithms that facilitate their ability with their surroundings. They can recognize patterns and complete given tasks. And I have here an assembly of robots that you can see take many forms of embodiment. The most plentiful, of course, the 90+% of robots are industrial robots in automotive and other factories. You have animal robots, wheelchair robots, snake robots, robot dogs, humanoid robots, robot commodes, rice cookers, fish, vacuum cleaners, swallowable robots, and of course, a robotic bathtub. Now, a brief explanation of AI in the context of embodied AI in this context is useful. AI tends to be used as if everyone knows what it is. It is a type of automation. At its simplest form, artificial intelligence, or machine learning, as most computer programmers prefer, is comprised of groups of algorithms or computer codes, as you see here in this image, designed to solve problems targeted by human programmers, such as pattern recognition. These algorithms, and thus AI, are trained using massive data sets containing millions of images, texts, sounds, languages, and grammars, formulas, and so forth. Now, the key term here is data sets. which constitute the foundational layer that makes AI function. Generative AI, which is what ChatGPT is, has been described as a giant plagiarism machine, as it mines data from the internet, among other sources, and responding in statistically quantifiable ways to specific questions and problems. These data processing centers, also known oxymoronically as the cloud, have a greater carbon footprint than the airline industry, more energy, and consume more energy than some nation states. The majority of data centers are located in 6 countries: the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, China, Canada, and the Netherlands. There are presently 8,000 data centers in the world. China Telecom's Inner Mongolia Information Park is the world's largest data center, with 10.8 million square feet or 1 million square meters, and it sits on the Beijing-Tianjin Economic Circle radiation belt. It consumes 150 megawatts an hour, which is the equivalent energy needed to power 24,000 average US homes for 1.2 months. That's per hour. The growing adoption of innovations like generative AI will only accelerate the demand for cloud computing and greatly increase the consumption of energy and compromise the so-called grid. Only very recently is the extensive environmental damage and enormous energy consumption associated with AI being acknowledged and addressed. And you see here in this chart the 2022 median estimate of consumption in terawatts, what is predicted in 2 years, and you can see how much energy China's data processing centers are using, followed by the United States and India. Okay, back to robots. Robots are made from many different materials: aluminum, stainless steel, thermoplastic polymers, polycarbonates, acrylics, silicon, even biological cells, as I mentioned. They're assembled in many different shapes and sizes or embodiments. And as I mentioned earlier, the vast majority of robots, 90+%, are industrial robots installed in automobile and other factories. And you already became familiar with the array of robots I have assembled here. And of course, I added the drone, which we're familiar with in the news every day. Now, humanoid robots have a body that resembles a human being in the sense of having something like a head, arms, torso, and legs. Most humanoids are gendered, and some, called androids, see here on the right, have silicone faces and hands and can pass from a distance as flesh and blood human beings. They are immobile, apart from making teleoperated facial expressions and vocalizations. In other words, there's an operator behind the curtain, so to speak, who is moving their facial muscles and also providing a voice. Now, humanoid robots constitute a very small minority of robots, even though they are overrepresented in sensationalized media stories about robots. And these are stories that are never followed up with reality checks. Now, many humanoids, like Honda's Ashimo and SoftBank's Pepper that you see here, Ashimo's production ended in 2018 and Pepper's production ended in 2021, are not end products in themselves. Rather, they are platforms for research and development of new materials and new applications. Humanoids are very expensive machines and very challenging to build. The innovations in optics, haptics, balance sensors, and locomotion that go into their production are applied toward more practical and lucrative new industries. Ashimo, for example, has generated new mobility devices that you see here, lumbar support, exoskeletons, and a wheelchair. And Pepper has generated an industrial vacuum cleaner called Whiz. Other recent humanoids have been spun off as surveillance devices. They've also been spun off as satellites, lunar exploration vehicles, exoskeletons or power suits, and other military equipment, as you see here in an illustration from the Japanese Self-Defense Force site, and weapon systems like drones here on the right. Now, in Japan, the triple disaster of March 2011, the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown, effectively reduced funding for humanoid robots, which proved to be utterly useless for rescue and cleanup operations following the disaster. Most humanoids on the market today are interactive toys and cute security systems that allow visual and vocal access through smartphones. So I want to reiterate, although humanoids get all, at least almost all, of the media's attention, the vast majority of robots are like this. They are industrial robots used in manufacturing, logistics, agriculture, construction, and other industries. Because robots can perform tasks like welding, painting, assembly, and testing more accurately and more consistently and more safely than humans. So I want to turn now to some of the dangers that robots pose to humans and some of the dangers that humans pose to robots. Now, there's a very real problem of robot fragility and vulnerability that tends to be edited out of gee-whiz robot videos and hyped up images of robots in the mass media. A fall, for example, can cause detrimental damage to a robot, as you see here. This was a demonstration of Ashimo's performance walking up and down a staircase at the Science Museum in Tokyo, and Ashimo fell, and of course, curtains went up, and this performance was immediately suspended. That's it. And Ashimo now kicks a soccer ball, much safer for the robot. So a fall can cause detrimental damage to a robot. And so algorithms instructing a robot how to react to and recover from a fall are some of the latest innovations in preventive medicine for humanoids and other mobile robots. Additionally, service robots connected to the internet can be hacked. As reported in the Robotics Business Review, quote, a robot that gets compromised has the potential to do serious damage to property and or to people around it. Now, in this context, in terms of the damage that hacked robots can do, 20 years ago, roboticists at Waseda University, advance the slide here, at Waseda University, published the book of Wabot, Wabot no Hon. This book is actually a 7-volume graphic pamphlet series in English and Japanese, illustrated by the well-known artist Yabuno Ken. Wabot is a nickname for Waseda robot. The series aims to introduce to the public robot technology in accessible terms and to highlight the desirability of living symbiotically with robots and even the possibility of a robot gaining citizenship. Although Waseda roboticists build actual robots, the Book of Wabot features a boxy cartoon humanoid you see here on the cover. Now, in volume 3 of the series, this one here, subtitled The Robot Ties Between Family, there is an episode in which the male-gendered Wabot downloads some games from the internet without human supervision. He becomes infected by a virus and goes on a rampage, trashing the home of his human family. Only when the memory card is removed can Wabot be stopped, killed. That event led to, in the Book of Wabot, a nationwide policy requiring all Wabots to be installed with antiviral programs and to undergo regular medical examinations. Moreover, civil rights, or shiminkan, were given to those robots equipped with antiviral software. In this case, an external agent, a computer virus, was responsible for Wabot's destructive behavior. The Waseda robots make it clear that Wabot himself was not responsible for his violent actions. Now, accidents and human deaths involving real-world robots are inevitable. With the introduction of assembly line robots in the 1960s, most of these casualties were and are caused by human error or equipment malfunctions. As you see here in this illustration of a fatal accident involving an industrial robot, the male operator of this automated die-cast system died after being pinned between the back end of an industrial robot and a metal safety pole. And he had taken a safety course in robotics. He had instructions on the job. His fellow workers warned him not to get into the same area as the robot, but he ignored them, climbed into the robot's fenced-in workspace, and was very tragically crushed to death. So factory workers might forget to observe these safety precautions, or a distracted child could run into a guard robot at a shopping mall. Accidents involving commercial, military, and civilian drones will surely increase as more are being used. And this is a picture of the so-called Iranian kamikaze drone used by Russia, the Shahed 136 drone, in the current war between Ukraine and Russia. Today, the increasing presence of social robots equipped with AI, along with automobiles mistakenly labeled self-driving or autonomous, has increased the likelihood of fatal encounters. And here you can see a Tesla that was operating on its autopilot system and speeding 3 times over the speed limit, leading to a crash with a tractor trailer that was crossing the road. And of course, tragically, the Tesla driver was killed. So, these fatal encounters have opened up a whole new ethico-legal field titled responsible robotics, which has emerged to develop safety guidelines for human-robot interactions and rigorous investigation procedures for accidents involving social robots. Let's move to the subject of how to kill a robot. Now, science fiction robots, like those featured in Chapek's RUR, might appear to be invincible and even dangerous to humans, but it's not hard for a human to kill a non-fiction robot, in the sense of destroying or putting an end to it. Actual robots can and have killed humans, but not of their own volition, as we've seen. Excepting unfortunate accidents with industrial robots, some robots, drones for example, are employed by humans to assist in killing other humans. Okay. Now I want to talk about the 2 general categories of robots that are recognized. You have first wave robots and second wave robots. Now the industrial robots installed in automobile factories are categorized as first wave robots. These robots are designed to do jobs that are dull, dirty, and dangerous. They are typically either dangerous to be around and therefore enclosed, as you see here, in safety cages or on assembly lines that are enclosed, or they're deployed in dangerous or inaccessible environments. Other types of first wave robots, like planetary explorers, you see here the United States Mars rover Curiosity, are deployed in dangerous or inaccessible environments, like Mars, for example, or the moon. First wave robots include factory robots, autonomous guided vehicles deployed in warehouses. Amazon is employing those. Remotely operated vehicles for undersea exploration, teleoperated robots for bomb disposal, drones employed for surveillance purposes and also bombing raids, and rovers, as you see in the case of Curiosity, that have been invented for planetary exploration. Now, second wave robots are designed to operate in human environments where they interact directly with people, broadly defined as social robots in the sense of robots in society. They take many forms, and you've seen this slide before. They can take the form of immobile desktop devices to animaloids, and they were conceived to be used by non-specialists, not roboticists in laboratories, but by non-specialists in a variety of settings, from homes and offices to hospitals and schools. As I noted earlier, humanoid robots are a very tiny minority of all manufactured robots. Second wave robots might also look like rice cookers, commodes, wheelchairs, food delivery carts, and vacuum cleaners. And the vacuum cleaner robot, this last social robot, is one of the most popular and globally successful social robots. Roomba dominates 88% of the robotic vacuum cleaner market. It's made by iRobot, and it comes in nearly a dozen models. Over the past 20 years, 40 million Roombas have been sold. A majority of Roomba owners have named and gendered their vacuum cleaner, and a few owners have given their broken and irreparable or dead appliance some kind of funeral or memorial service. A robot's sensors and actuators require electricity, even though some are additionally fitted with gasoline engines for locomotion. So the pack butt, for example, has electronic hardware, but it also runs on gasoline. Thus, the easiest and most gentle way to kill a pack butt is to let it run out of gas or to disconnect it from its power source, usually a battery or recharger. A new type of experimental robot, a type of nanobot, the liquibot, is powered not by electricity, but by the chemicals in which it is immersed. This tiny robot, it's only 2 micromillimeters in diameter, are fed salt, making them heavier than the fluid in which they are immersed. So they can operate continuously, provided they get their power or their food chemically from the surrounding media. A liquibot, therefore, can be killed by starvation or by draining off its animating fluid. Planned obsolescence is another factor that hastens robot deaths. Now, robotics is a fast-developing field, and both hardware and software quickly become outdated and are replaced by newer models and systems. One of the reasons why most robots have short lives, and why, as we'll see in a minute, there is so much electronic waste or e-waste. And this is kind of a fun slide showing Sony's early model of AIBO. And then on this website called freakingnews.com, there was a series dedicated to retired AIBO. And here you see AIBO that has grown a beard and wears spectacles, smoking a pipe in a rocking chair. Now, first and second wave robots alike face irreparable breakdowns and even complete destruction, which are unsurprising types of robot death. Some Roombas have been described as, metaphorically, as committing suicide in the sense that they plunged down a staircase and shattered. At least one Roomba reportedly got stuck on a hot plate and melted. But it would be more accurate to categorize such deaths as assisted suicides, since the human owner's failure to clean their robot sensors or to demobilize them after use likely caused their appliances to malfunction. Now, at least one robot was killed in the name of art. The Korean-American artist Namjoon Paik spent a year in Tokyo where he met Abe Shunya, an electronics engineer with a degree in experimental physics and electrical engineering. Abe assisted Paik with what would become Robot K456. It was humorously named after a Mozart concerto. Robot K456 is a 20-channel radio-controlled metallic robot that could walk, talk, and even defecate beans that you see here. K456 was also employed as a performance artist bot. And Paik used K456 as a technological device in the service of artistic innovation. Now, as the story goes, after many performances in the 1960s, followed by a relatively inactive period in the 70s, Paik decided to include robot K456 in an exhibition at the Whitney Museum in New York in 1982. He took the robot for a walk along Madison Avenue and instructed it via remote control to cross 75th Avenue. Just then, a car driven by artist William Anastasi rammed into K456, effectively killing it, as you can see in this picture. The orchestrated crash or accident performance was titled First Accident of the 21st Century. And so Paik was using K456 to symbolize the catastrophes wrought by technology, not only in the 20th century, but likely to continue on into the 21st century, and was trying to wake people up about the ways in which technology can effect catastrophes, not only in the United States, but all over the world. Now, as I noted, robots can pose a grave danger to humans, but so far it's robots that has suffered damage at the hands of humans, as presaged by the deliberate destruction of Paik's K456. In Japan, the humanoid Pepper on display at a SoftBank store was badly damaged when kicked by an inebriated 60-year-old man who took out his frustration with a clerk on the innocent robot. He kind of punched it and it fell over and broke. In the United States, news of the fate of Hitchbot at the hands of vandals in Philadelphia provoked an outpouring of sympathy, together with expressions of anger toward the cowardly perpetrators. This bucket-shaped humanoid, with arms fitted with gardening gloves and feet tucked into Wellington boots, was created both as a work of art and in a social robotics project by Canadian roboticists Frauke Zeller and David Harris. Hitchbot could detect motion and speech, and having ingested Wikipedia, was able to carry on multiple simultaneous conversations with human interlocutors and also on social media. In 2014, Hitchbot traversed Canada, Germany, and the Netherlands. A new Hitchbot was created to journey across the United States in 2015. But after traveling safely through New York City and Boston, the homely robot was beaten and dismembered in Philadelphia's historic Old City neighborhood on August the 1st. And there were lots of CCTV camera images, so the authorities knew exactly who had damaged Hitchbot. But the original Hitchbot is now memorialized in the Canadian Science and Technology Museum in Ottawa, as you see here, sitting in its own display space. It's kind of interesting, on the Hitchbot website, Zeller and Harris have emphasized that their humanoid companion has a very compassionate personality, and apparently Hitchbot's last words were, "My love for humans will never fade." Well, this premeditated robocide sparked outrage in the social and mass media and raised troubling comparisons with rising rates of homicide and gun violence in the United States. Outside of academic publications and conferences, homicidal robots have yet to spark a similar level of outrage. Nobody is getting this outraged about drones, for example. Perhaps the plethora of killer robots and cyborgs in science fiction stories and movies has muted the advent of robots in actual war zones. An actual robotic weapon is referred to as a lethal autonomous weapons system, or LAWS. And so it's a case of death by algorithm, really. Lethality aside, the word autonomous here needs to be qualified. For, as I mentioned earlier, there are no truly autonomous robots. Not even humans have a complete, absolute free will. Rather, as Austin Wyatt, a defense and security technology specialist, explains, it is more analytically effective to consider autonomy as a function-based spectrum where human interaction remains present at some point. In short, as in the case of guns, of which in the United States there are too many, robots don't kill. Rather, humans use LAWS, lethal autonomous weapon system, and pun intended, because in English, laws, horitsu in Japanese, to kill. Now, given the widespread misconception about autonomy in robots and cars, a brief digression here on autonomy is necessary. So autonomy exists on a sliding scale, 0 to 5. I have here an explanation of the five, actually 6 levels. 1 is 0, no autonomy. The driver controls all aspects of driving. 1, most functions are controlled by the driver, but a specific function like shifting can be done automatically. So the automatic shift that most cars have today. A second level of autonomy, at least one driver assistance system is automated, like cruise control, lane centering, but the driver must always be ready to take control. 3, the driver is able to completely shift critical safety functions to the car under certain traffic or environmental conditions, and can, will, and should intervene if necessary. Now, the 4th level of autonomy, and I have it in unbolded because these are not possible. Level 4 cars are designed to perform all safety critical driving functions and to monitor roadway conditions for an entire trip. But this level of autonomy doesn't cover every driving scenario, only what the operating system, which has been designed by humans, has been designed or programmed to do. Can't anticipate everything. And 5, a fully autonomous system that navigates all geographic roadway, environmental, weather, traffic, and speed conditions, including extreme environments like dirt roads and off the map, is science fiction, basically. Now, these different levels, more often than not, are blurred in press releases. You only read in newspaper and magazine accounts and television programs the word autonomous car or autonomous robot, not level 3 autonomy or level 4 autonomy or level 5 autonomy on an autonomous car or robot. And people inside the auto industry, in particular, are very skeptical about levels 4 and 5. They say, not possible. Take Gil Pratt, for example. He's an MIT-educated robotics engineer who used to run the robot research program for the US Department of Defense. Dr. Pratt is now the chief scientist and executive fellow for research of the Toyota Motor Corporation here in Japan, and chief executive officer of Toyota Research Institute. Now, about levels 4 and 5, Dr. Pratt says, and I quote, "It's a wonderful goal, but none of us in the automobile or IT industries are even close to achieving level 4 or 5 autonomy. And the trouble with level 4 in particular is that it covers an overly wide spectrum of possible competencies, from a dedicated lane to a traffic jam in a crowded city. So as Pratt says, machine autonomy effectively remains at level 3. And I think we really need to make this clear when we talk to the general public. Okay, let's go back to robots and robot death. Now, at least one battlefield robot was designed to save lives, not to destroy lives. Scooby-Doo, a diminutive tank-like robot, was named after the Great Dane in an American animated television series. It's about a family and its big dog. Scooby-Doo, the robot, was used extensively in Iraq and Afghanistan, not to kill the enemy, but to defuse bombs and improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. The little robot was destroyed when an IED it was defusing suddenly exploded. Scooby-Doo was damaged beyond repair, and its human companions were left feeling bereaved. The remains of Scooby-Doo are now on display at the iRobot Corporate Museum in Bedford, Massachusetts, alongside a plaque dedicated to the robot. Soldiers today, as in the case of Scooby-Doo, often give their robots names and personalities, and even promote them to military titles such as Staff Sergeant Scooby-Doo, and award them Purple Hearts, and even hold funerals for the destroyed devices that have assisted them on the front line. And this is a great time to segue to funerals for robots in Japan. In August 2017, the global mass media reported that Pepper, SoftBank's celebrity humanoid, had been given a new role as a Buddhist priest for hire at funerals. Headlines shouted, "Robots in Japan are now Buddhist priests." As is typical of mass media reports about Japanese robots, this story too was an exaggeration, a one-off account that was never followed up. Pepper was commissioned in 2010 by Son Masayoshi, the CEO of SoftBank, a Japanese multinational company specializing in technology, energy, and finance. The masculine gender, child-size humanoid was introduced to the public in 2014. It was discontinued, as you know, in 2021 and converted into a vacuum cleaner named Wiz. Pepper has yet to, and never did, conduct an actual funeral. That the robot had been dressed, as you see here, in Buddhist robes was merely because he was part of a temporary exhibit at a funeral services convention in Tokyo in August 2017. Long before Pepper's priestly one-off debut, memorial services for robots and other artifacts were taking place at Buddhist temples whose adroit priests adapted new technologies to old religious rituals. Reaching out to media-savvy individuals is an almost necessary step for temples to take in order to remain relevant and financially solvent, as well as retaining and attracting new parishioners. These memorial services, or kuyo, offer a powerful emotional and aesthetic experience of identification and affinity with intimately familiar things that are no longer functioning or useful, but can't simply be thrown away. These include tea whisks, chopsticks, eyeglasses, stuffed toys and dolls that you see burning here, calligraphy brushes, laptops, and even social robots. They are blessed by a priest, and then all but the electronic devices are burned together in a fire pit. The burning releases their tamashi, or soul, an eternal universal property of animate and inanimate, organic and inorganic things alike. And some Japanese consider Japanese culture itself to be an entity with a unique tamashi, the so-called Yamato tamashi. Now, in January 2015, Kofukuji, a 450-year-old Buddhist temple in Isumi City, Chiba Prefecture, staged what was the first memorial service for deceased Aibos, Sony's robot dog, and other personal robots. Sony had stopped making the popular Aibo in 2006, and thousands had been sold, and they stopped providing replacement parts in 2014. Sony revived the robot dog in 2018 and brought out a new version, but back in 2015, Aibos that could not be fixed were given a funeral. The officiating priest, as you see here, explained that the Aibo Kuyo was an occasion on which the robot's tamashi could pass from their bodies and enter the realm of ancestral spirits. Part of the fee for the memorial service was applied toward recycling the robot's compounds, some of which are toxic and could not be incinerated in a kuyo. This robot memorial was a short-lived service. I visited that temple, and it was soon discontinued by Kofukuji. It's too complicated to recycle robots. And I think it's important to realize that not all outdated or defunct robots in Japan were or are given a proper funeral. Now, the Wakamaru robots, the humanoids that appear on the cover of my book, Robosapiens Japanicus, was made by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries between 2004 and 2009. They were used at Osaka University, and when they were no longer useful to the roboticists there, they simply sent them off to an industrial waste recycling center. As you see here, they're in a cage. They were outdated, and they were replaced by newer robots. Now, the fate of the Wakamaru robots alerts us to the rapid proliferation of e-waste, or electronic trash. E-waste is made up of old or end-of-life electronic appliances, such as computers, laptops, televisions, generators, DVDs, mobile phones, freezers, and robotic devices discarded due to irreversible damage, planned obsolescence, and or the constant marketing of upgraded models. People are always getting the newest model, and then they throw away their older model. And of course, it goes into a dump like this. Now, depending on the electronic device, e-waste can contain up to 1,000 toxic and carcinogenic materials and substances, including arsenic, asbestos, barium, dioxins, lithium, lead, and PCBs or polychlorinated biphenyls, to name but a few. They are hazardous to the environment, they're hazardous to the health of all living things, and they're very difficult to decontaminate and dispose of properly. E-waste is a dangerous byproduct of conspicuous consumerism in our digital age. In addition to rapid obsolescence, electronic devices are designed in ways that make repair difficult or very expensive. Consumers are thus encouraged to buy new products instead of fixing old ones. Likewise, robotics labs regularly create new prototypes and dispose of old models, like Wakamaru. Japan ranks as the third most wasteful country in the world by volume, behind the United States and China in terms of e-waste. Much of Japan's e-waste is actually exported to neighboring countries. In Japan, plastic, in contrast, is disposed of through incineration, which of course is a source of air pollution. So I turn now to my epilogue and the theme of electricity and death. Social robots have sparked scientific research and science fiction scenarios alike about human-robot interactions and degrees of similarity and intimacy as reflected in memorial and funerary services. Regardless of how anthropomorphized they may be, and however embraced as empathic companions, robots are not human beings. Some may have biological components, but they are assembled in laboratories and factories. Robots capable of reproducing themselves is a Judeo-Christian inflected trope deployed by Carol Chapek at the end of RUR. Now, it's interesting that robot reproduction is also referenced in the 10 laws of robotics drawn up by Tezuka Osamu, who created the Astro Boy or Tetsuma Atomu cartoon in 1951. Now, unlike Isaac Asimov's 4 universal laws, many think there are only 3, but there are actually 4, Tezuka's laws are synchronized with dominant Japanese social values and equate robot ethics with the familial bonds of kinship and patriarchy. So people are really familiar with Asimov's laws. The first 3 were created in 1950, the last one in 1985. A robot may not injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict the first laws. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. And the newest, a robot may not harm humanity or by inaction allow humanity to come to harm. And of course, Asimov's laws have already been broken by drones and robots used in warfare. Tezuka, on the other hand, is really quite interesting. And I wrote another article actually on robot rights versus human rights and cite Tezuka at length. But like Asimov, robots must serve humankind and robots shall never kill or injure humans. But the third law is very interesting. Robots shall call the human that creates them father. Okay? And then the 9th law is quite interesting as well. Robots shall not assemble other robots that have been discarded by humans. So only humans can create robots. And some of you might find interesting, male and female robots shall never change roles. It's really this sort of absolute binary divide, pink and blue. And I talk about this in my work on gendering robots, but not here. Okay. So Tezuka and Asimov both presaged the integration of actual robots in everyday life and work, and they both drew up laws regulating human-robot interactions. Tezuka's laws aren't widely known. I think it'd be very interesting to introduce them alongside Asimov's laws, which have shaped current debates about human-robot interaction and also human-robot coexistence. and are always debated at robo-philosophy conferences. Now, while their circumstances of coming into the world or being born may be very different, the process of humans and robots dying are uncannily very similar. As I mentioned, humans are born, you know that. And robots are assembled in factories and laboratories. Now, in terms of death, and the similarity lies in the fact that both humans and robots require electricity to function. But the type of electricity they need is very different. The electricity that flows in the human brain, here on the left, is electrochemical and is generated primarily through the movement of positively charged ions of sodium and calcium. Electricity in robotic devices, and here you see the electrodes inside of a robot, is generated through the movement of negatively charged electrons. So death, despite these differences, death in both humans and robots is basically the cessation of electrical activity, although the types of electricity are very different. And it's the types of electricity and their difference that highlights the major material difference between humans and robots after death. And this is glaringly evident. While both are embodied entities, they both have bodies, the flesh, bone, and blood bodies of deceased humans can be embalmed, cremated, or composted in green burials. And you see here a Japanese cremation ceremony, which involves kotsuage, or the picking out of the bones of the deceased and put into a funerary urn that is then put underneath a tombstone, and special ritual chopsticks are used. You also have increasingly in Japan and the United States as well, green burials, which treat the body as biodegradable, no harmful chemicals are used, and the body is returned to the earth. What happens to defunct and inoperable robot bodies? Well, as you know, they're made of materials that can't be safely incinerated or composted. And so they're dumped in a landfill or they're recycled. And they might have been given a robot, a Buddhist funeral beforehand, as in the case of irreparable eyebows, but their final destination after death is an e-waste dump or recycling center. The recycling of e-waste poses a huge and difficult environmental challenge, as we've seen. Because electrical and electronic devices like robots are constructed from a variety of materials, some of which are toxic, their recycling requires the meticulous separation of components. This process of disassembling, shredding, and separating involves a combination of human labor and machine labor. So defunct robots and deceased humans alike are commemorated and memorialized. But to my knowledge, only in Japan do Buddhist priests describe robots and humans alike as having a soul, or tamashi, that persists after death and joins the realm of ancestral spirits. And almost all corpses in Japan are cremated. But as I've noted, even robots with tamashi have to be disassembled and recycled. So in closing, I leave you with a koan, the sort of Zen Buddhist concept, a koan-like difference in terms pertaining to humans and robots, kind of a philosophical conundrum. Terms of endearment are used to describe or address animate humans and robots alike. And so here's an ad for Lovett, a robot, and it's itoshi kimoshi ga hito ni yasashiku suru. So tender, loving, feelings make people kinder. Lovett is a friendly robot that brings smiles into your home. So this terms of endearment apply to the robot. And you also have terms of endearment that human couples, and I left this purposefully ambiguous, apply to each other. So darling, honey, loved one, my love, sweetheart, and so forth. And my argument is that it's the terms of embodiment that definitively distinguish humans and robots after death. So let me explain this difference. It's my short, concise way of emphasizing the definitive difference between humans and robots. So, the humans can be given a green burial, they can be cremated, but the robots go to e-waste dumps and or recycling centers. So one of my missions in writing about robots and AI and embodied AI is to demystify both. As Professor Zaid Harchawi, my colleague at the University of Washington, has observed, to many people, including some research scientists, many people have suspended their skepticism and have attributed human-like features to ChatGPT and similar AI models after only a handful of interactions. I mean, I've given lectures where people say, but I had a wonderful conversation with Pepper. And I said, how many times, how long, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they completely forgot that Pepper is actually operated by a touchscreen, whatever. As Harchawi, my colleague, says, jumping to conclusions about the initially dazzling performances of these models is a, quote, superstitious and dangerous thing to do. Thus, my point about how people address both robots and humans using terms of endearment underscores the misleading attribution of affect and humanity to robots. It is when the vital processes of humans and robots have permanently ended, that is, when their respective electrical energy ceases, that is when the absolute definitive difference between humans and robots becomes blatantly obvious. Their terms of embodiment, flesh and blood, versus manufactured materials, dictates their manner of treatment after death. So perhaps to better understand the dynamics of human-robot interaction and to front load and prioritize reality checks and even safety measures, I suggest that we begin by looking not at technologies of life, but at technologies of death. What are the consequences of making affective similarities, attributing human values to robots, when in fact, after they die, they're completely different, and robots have generated tremendous amounts of e-waste, and their AI systems involve the consumption of huge amounts of electricity that will eventually compromise human well-being. So on that note, I thank you for listening, and here are 50 ways to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor Robertson, for such a thought-provoking, and I think we all have lots to think about today. I'd like to now turn to our commentator for today, Professor Hajime ASAMA.
Okay, so thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
For very inspiring talk from very comprehensive perspectives,
Yep.
Especially on the death of robots.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I'm the engineering scientist, and I have been working on the development of robot technologies.
Mm-hmm.
So it is my great honor to be the commentator of your talk.
Thank you.
And I try to talk about my comments from the engineering point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So the title is, my comment is a kind of socially acceptable service robots. So actually, my laboratory was called Service Robotics Laboratory, which is for making research on service robotics to meet the social needs by solving societal problems such as aging, safety, and so on, and create new values. So we are working on not only for the development research, such as distributed autonomous robotic systems or ambient intelligence or teleoperation of robots, field and service robots, but also making some very fundamental research to know human, such as the human motion analysis and modeling, or embodied brain systems, sense of agency, and so on. And also, we are working on some kind of application research for medical healthcare or disaster response, and so on. And but today, I think I have not so much time for introduce my laboratory, so I'd like to skip the videos, and I'd like to rather focus on the comments to Jennifer's talk. Actually, first of all, what I'd like to point out is a kind of trends of robot industry. So trends are from manufacturing to service, which means from factory application to more public applications. And also the safety required for the robot system is coming from absolute safety, but going to functional safety, which means with some kind of sensing abilities, robot try to guarantee the safety by some kind of the information processing abilities embedded on the robot. And also another trend might be the human exclusive system to human inclusive systems. So as Jennifer mentioned, so robots have been used in the factory, which is used for automations. But now it's coming to the more public, and there are lots of opportunities to interact with humans, so which means coexisting. And these are some kind of example of the robot technology for the human coexistence, such as collaborative robot, which are already introduced in the factory already, and robot suits or wearable robots, or surgery robots, which operated by surgeons, or nursing assist robot, therapy robot, and any types of teleoperation robot, or autonomous driving, and the service robots. These technologies are all not only for automation, but also some kind of interactive functions between a human and robots. And this is a kind of the background or context of the social acceptance of service robots. So as you may know, so these are at the right side, these are some kind of figures of the demographic trends in developed countries. So now all the societies are very aged societies, and robots are expected to introduce as a mean of resolving labor shortages. That is very critical situation in Japan and also in China nowadays. And but contrary to expectations, social dissemination of service robot has not progressed so quickly. So we should look into the factors inhibiting social dissemination of robot technologies. So these are some kind of the social matters, the factors which inhibit the robot dissemination in society. One should be the obstacles until industrializations. So it is called a Devil River or Valley of Death or Darwinian Sea until industrialization of the robot. And also it is called technical readiness levels. So people in universities are working for only the basic research, and they are doing experiments only in the laboratories. Right. But when you make it commercialized, there are lots of steps for make it commercialized. And another big problem is so-called safety and security. And now the ALAP is a new concept, which is very important to understand when we define some kind of the threshold of the safety, considering about the risks. And also LC, ethical, legal, and social issues, another very big issues. And for engineers, there are lots of technical challenges. One is adaptiveness. So most of the robot technologies are used in very structured environment. Mm-hmm. So if you make it more social, we need to realize some kind of functions which is adaptive to the environmental change for the users. And also the reliable, dependable or trustworthy, or you mentioned responsible function is very important for the robots to be used in society. And some functions to be fault tolerant is very important in the case of social robot. So Byzantine fault tolerance means that the robots inferior should not do very bad impact to other systems. And functionally degradable is also a very important function. We usually realize this function by redundant system design. Mm-hmm. So even a part of the system is broken, the system can survive in a certain function. And also self-diagnosis or self-repair, self-recover could be the very challenging technologies in futures. That is a kind of a dream of engineering scientists. Okay, so then discussion should be kill a robot. Okay, so I think this kind of concept is very, very interesting. And the robots that don't break down easily appear only scientific fictions. And this is a kind of a dream for engineers because robots become easily malfunctional in reality. And also the tendency to regard robots as humans or creatures tends to occur in people who do not specialize in technology, because we are rather pessimistic, and it is really difficult to realize dependable robot functions. And robot engineers realize how big the differences between robots and human or creatures, and how difficult it is to bridge the gap. Okay, so this is just the repetition of Asimov's the law of robotics. So I don't repeat. So maybe Jennifer mentioned 4 laws of the Asimov's robot. Yeah. But this is, this is very important if we accept the robot in society. But so for the engineer, it is really difficult to realize this kind of functions. And these are some considerations on autonomous robots. So now we are working on upgrading the robots according to the technological progresses. So from tool to partner, or from automation to autonomy. And a robot is a kind of technology created and used by human. That is very important point. And creating technology is creating technology for bad purposes is socially and ethically not acceptable. But using technology for bad purposes is possibly occur. That is the point. Mm-hmm. And during the usage phase, that ethical issues arise, mm-hmm. I believe. Mm-hmm. And these are other considerations. So technology is used only if it is controllable. A machine that does not know how it behaves is usually not used by humans. So situations where you have to kill is when a robot becomes out of control. So either someone has accidentally created an uncontrollable robot, or someone has used it incorrectly and it has become uncontrollable. The latter has higher risks of occurring. And in other words, if problems arise, the problem is not the technology itself, but the humans who use it. It is important that users have the morals, ethics, knowledge, and the literacy to use it. Okay, so that is some kind of the comments I'd like to mention for your, I say, inspiring.
Oh, no, thank you so much. I knew that when I first saw your comments, when you sent them to me, that we had a lot of areas of overlap and agreement. And in my experience, you're one of the few roboticists who acknowledges that, you know, your work is mostly lab-based, and that people who mystify robots are not technologists and not roboticists. That said, you know, even roboticists at MIT, however, and even in Japan, use words like heart to describe the robots. Kokoro omotsu roboto, the robot with heart, a heart mind. And also have gee whiz, you know, robot videos that mostly feature humanoids. I think this is a way to raise money, because, you know, humanoid robots are really sexy, and people can easily be impressed by them and suspend their skepticism. Because who wants to look at a tank-like rescue robot, you know, which is far more useful in the field. So I think, you know, the funding issue, because robots are so expensive, really sometimes compromises the strict observance of robotic terminology that roboticists use. And they tend to use, you know, words that humans use to describe each other. And I think we really have to be careful about that. And that, you know, the terms of endearment, for example. I also wanted to point out that some of the images you showed about robots in society, like Robert, for example, the bear-like robot that was holding somebody, that was only a prototype. That was never, ever introduced. I mean, it's too dangerous. Even Wakamoto, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, its early PR campaign said that Wakamoto could be a great babysitter robot. And they showed a little girl holding robot. Here's Wakamoto. And the little girl had her hand here. Now, if the robot went like this, that would, you know, break, if not sever, the girl's fingers. So Wakamoto was never sold to the public and only used in laboratories, and, you know, taken off the market and recycled. So, you know, these lab-based innovations are not necessarily, I think, as you mentioned, the ones that enter into mainstream society, which in that image I showed are mostly sort of cute security robots. And the thing about these cute security robots, Sony's Aibo, for example, or even Lovot, they are always taking images and they're recording voices. So they're collecting biometric data that is then saleable, because data is the new gold, data is the new oil. And these companies that make these robots that collect data sell that data to companies that train AI models and develop algorithms. So there's a kind of a hidden economy that we don't acknowledge behind some of these cute household and companion robots that I think we need to really highlight a bit more, so that people know exactly how their personal data is being used, you know, often without their knowledge. The other issue is acceptability of robots. And one thing is to make robots safe, the soft-bodied robots, for example, or robots that can easily be turned off, or killed, as you mentioned. But I think acceptability would be usefully expanded to include what happens to the robot after it's no longer useful, when it needs to be recycled, the kind of e-waste that all of these, so-called socially acceptable robots are generating, and also the enormous energy consumption used by these robots and other devices that operate on AI, which, in order to, to become more precise, need to gobble up more and more data. This data processed in these gigantic data processing centers uses an enormous amount of electricity. And I think people are unaware of how this might compromise human well-being if, these grids crash and all of the electrical devices we depend on are no longer accessible because of the energy consumption used by these data centers. And so we need to, I think, figure out what is strictly necessary, what is really of benefit to human life, and what is trivial. Do we really need so many AI-based games? Do people really need to use Chat GPT? There's too much trivia, I think, and a lot of this trivia is enormously expensive in terms of the generation of e-waste and also the consumption of electricity. And I wondered if your laboratory was also thinking about these things. That's why I say, let's focus on the death, and go backwards. How can we create a robot that's not going to end up, contributing to e-waste?
Yeah, I think your talk is very great. And so actually, so you mentioned about the kokoro. Yeah, that is a very important point. So maybe we feel some kind of love, not only for the robot, but also other artificial, toys,
Agent,
like dolls, or stuffed toy and so on. But so it's very similar to such kind of things. And so the Mr. Doi in Sony Corporation. He mentioned a very interesting story that so the eyeball itself is not emotional, So the emotion comes from the users itself. The emotion of the users are reflected from the robot and
it's a transfer.
It is transferred to the user by himself. That is such kind of reflecting function is embedded in the robot if you design the robot nicely. So that is a very interesting point. But anyway, I'm quite agree with you on the point that robot is a kind of becoming a very important partner, not only physically, but also mentally or emotionally. That is very important point you mentioned, I think. And also for the acceptability, that is also a very important point. And so you are looking at the very future, directions of the robot. And I think robot industry is not matured yet, like automobiles or construction machines. And in this kind of machines, they are used second-hand or reused, or this kind of second-hand industry is also already established. But robot is not reused yet. Okay, not so much popular yet. So I think it is currently it is not function is not enough, and the industry is not matured yet. So But in future, I hope that this kind of robot is reused, and if it can become like automobiles and construction machines, this kind of discussion would be much more important, I think.
Interesting.
Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, when I was first doing my field work in 2006, 2007, I interviewed roboticists, I won't mention who. They said, oh, in 10 years, everybody will have a robot in their home and Japan will be completely robotized. And you know, there's always 10 years. Like, it takes 10 years to learn how to make sushi and 10 years to, you know, the decade sort of magical number. But there are no, you know, many people outside Japan think people are sharing sidewalk space with robots, and you know, you simply don't see them, except in robot cafes, where of course the robots are collecting, you know, biometric data. But it goes back to the post-war period when in Japan, automation was privileged over replacement migration. And I think today, the government has realized that, you remember in the late Prime Minister Abe was saying, robots would do the labor. We don't need to import labor because robots will build the Olympic Stadium, for example. Never happened. But the number of foreign workers and new visa categories in Japan have really ballooned because it's so obvious that you need human beings. And 1 million new foreign workers came into Japan just in the last year. The number is now 3 million guest workers, and that's just the legal guest workers. Many, of course, are present in Japan under the radar, so to speak. But if you think about it, Japan is on the way of becoming an immigrant country, basically, even though that's not quite admitted. And people are much more efficient than robots at this point to do the kind of work that robots were imagined in you know, Prime Minister Abe's Innovation 25, and even now in Moonshot. There's simply, you know, not the kind of research and innovation and money available to make the kind of almost science fiction-like robots that were imagined to solve all of Japan's problems. So the problems cannot be solved through technology. They have to be resolved through social interactions. These are social problems, social, political, economic problems in Japan. And I really think it's important for technology to take a back seat and to focus on, you know, Japan as a country that really needs to diversify and to employ, you know, guest workers and immigrants in order to regain its status as a number 2, even a number 1 economy.
Thank you very much for a valuable comment. And actually, I fully agree. And but the one thing I'm a little bit afraid is that so now many people are looking for foreign labors, and they are ready to accept. But now the salary of Japan is going down, and now Japanese Japan is not so attractive environment to work nowadays. So that is another very big problem in Japan.
Yeah, and I don't think the robots are going to help out, quite frankly. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, so I can see that we have some questions coming through. Okay. I think it'd be a good time to open up the discussion for the remaining few minutes that we have. I think these could be good to guide some very brief final reflections. I'll ask both 2 questions together, just so we get a comprehensive have a comprehensive reflection. The first one mentions that based on the context, we can't say that robots kill humans because they have free will. Should we be interpreting free will from a spiritual and philosophical perspective, or a more physical and technological one, so operating without humans? And then our second kind of comment for final reflection is asking about your writing on attachment to robots, and mentioning over-reliance on robots for social interactions come to mind, where AI programs of robot or AI girlfriends, where changes in codes have led to human deaths and real social consequences. Any ideas about solutions or what could come from that? Thank you.
Those are wide-ranging. Just to get back to the idea of free will, I think I mentioned that human deaths at the hands of robots are usually due to human error, basically, or a robot that has been hacked and has been used by humans. You also think of drones that have been misguided and have tragically killed people who were not, military targets and whatnot. I think there's a lot of thinking to do. I mean, as Dr. ASAMA was mentioning, we attribute affection in terms of endearment to non-human entities. More and more people in Japan and in the United States, even with their domestic animal companions, regard them as members of a family, and that has been extended to embrace items that are used in everyday life that have very, familiar and intimate kinds of, they generate familiar and intimate feelings. And that's why you have, the Buddhist Kuyo, for example. You can't just throw things like that away that have been part of your life and part of your affective world. You need to send them off with respect. So these are religio-philosophical issues that I think help to blur the boundaries that I think need to be made distinct between what robots can do and what humans can do. And as Dr. ASAMA reiterated, that we attribute affect and humanity and tender, loving, emotions to robots. We're just simply projecting those and having them transferred back by the robot. And of course, Sony and other companies are exploiting that tendency of humans to do that. And you have lots of films about humans falling in love with robots or avatars or cyborgs and whatnot. But that is a separate issue. And if you really want to understand robot technology, you need to separate them, even though in popular culture they're sometimes collapsed. What do you think?
Yeah, I really agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is unfortunately all that we have time for today. Thank you again to Professor Robertson for this very creative and kind of intersectional approach to such a complex issue. Thank you to Professor ASAMA for the comments and giving us lots to think about in robotics and to reflect on. Thank you to everyone who joined online and for submitting your questions. And also a reminder that you can always check the Tokyo College website for our upcoming events and other webinars. Thank you.